Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to the August Cabinet meeting. Fire alarm procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, vacate the offices via the stairs. Please do not use the lifts. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Please switch off and turn to silent your mobile phones and do not make or receive calls while the meeting is in progress. Please note the meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. It will also be recorded and subsequently available on the internet. Does anybody intend to film the meeting? No. Thank you. Following members have asked to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1. Item 6, Councillors Rogers and Austin. Item 7, Councillor Bayford. Item 8, Councillor Austin. Item 11, Councillors Bayford and Davis. Item 15, Councillors Davis and Austin. Is there any other members who wish to speak under 20.1? No. Just for information, we will not be dealing with item 16 this evening. This is due to an error in the published papers, and that will come back to a future meeting with a corrected version of the papers, because we would be reaching a decision on slightly erroneous grounds if we did. Right. Apologies have been received from Councillor Duckworth. Everybody else is here. Does anybody in the Cabinet have an interest to declaring the items of business on the agenda this evening? Yeah. No? Minutes of the previous meeting, held on the 24th of July. Copies attached to the agenda pack. I propose we take the minutes as read. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Yates. Thank you. Members agree? Thank you. And we move on to the first substantive item, which is item 4, the purchase of vehicles for the cleansing service. Councillor Alban.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Lovely to see you all. Thank you. I shall get on with it. This report proposes the purchase of 6 vehicles to be used by the cleansing service, 5 of which are replacements that are planned and funded as part of the vehicle replacement programme, and 1 of which is will be paid for through funding as part of the government's simpler recycling legislation. The vehicles which are part of this process are as follows. 2 refuse collection vehicles, RCVs, up to a gross vehicle weight of 12 tonne. These vehicles are required to replace equivalent vehicles on the cleansing fleet which have reached their end of life the end of their reasonable working life, and as such are becoming increasingly unreliable and costing more in maintenance. The current programme indicates that replacements would be a 7.5 tonne RCV for street cleaning and a 12 tonne RCV with separate food pod for the collection service. However, upon review of the VRP, both operational and transport management recommends that the service would be best served by the purchase of 2 RCVs of GVW of 12 tonne without a food pod. The other 3 vehicles in the VRP are 1 large mechanical sweeper up to GV weight of 15 tonne and 2 small mechanical sweepers up to the GV weight of 5 tonne. To efficiently sweep the roads of Thanet on a regular basis, a form of mechanical sweeping is necessary. The VRP specifies 2 7.5 tonne sweeping vehicles to be procured, which was agreed by Council on the 29th of February 2024. However, upon review of the new However, upon review with our new transport manager, it was proposed that the suggested configuration would provide a better solution. The original report proposed the purchase of 2 mid-sized 7.5 tonne mechanical sweepers. What is now proposed is to purchase 1 large sweeper 12 tonnes, which offers a greater payload with only a slightly larger footprint, and 2 small sweeping vehicles up to 4 tonne, which would allow access to roads that could be inaccessible to larger vehicles. Key to this proposal will be to allocate work which suits the vehicle's specification, i.e. the larger vehicles will sweep the larger, wider roads, and the smaller ones focus on more residential areas. Informal market testing has indicated that the cost of these 3 vehicles would not exceed the £350,000 that was allocated for the original approved 7.5 tonne sweepers. A specialised food waste vehicle to be paid for with funding and not on the VRP. As part of the government's simpler recycling legislation, which has driven the recently agreed changes to recycling collections, we have been allocated £142,000 to help deliver these changes, £102,000 specifically for the vehicle. The service currently co-collects food on the same vehicles as the recycling and residual collections. This method has been seen to be inefficient and problematic in terms of vehicle maintenance. It is for these reasons and the fact that the new collections will not be collected by dual purpose vehicles, that a dedicated food waste vehicle has been identified to be the correct use for this funding. The vehicle type in question is widely used throughout the waste industry and is specifically designed for collecting food. For example, it has little or no internal mechanism, rounded corners, and is made from material less liable to degrade. To help achieve TDC's target of being net zero by 2030, suitable electric vehicles were evaluated as potential replacements. However, a very small market for equivalent vehicles with insufficient range, which would also be significantly over the expected spend, has led to a recommendation to purchase diesel vehicles and to fuel them with hydro-treated vegetable oil, HVO, instead of diesel, which reduces the tailpipe emissions significantly. This decision is in line with what was recommended at the Overview and Scrutiny Panel report regarding HVO fuel, and I propose the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Keane. Members, any comments? No? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, which is Manchester Road Depot Environmental Compliance Works. Councillor Alban.
Yes. Excusez-moi one moment. Right. This report is in relation to the Manchester Road Depot Environmental Compliance Works. This report sets out 2 recommendations to Cabinet in relation to the Manchester Road Depot Environmental Compliance Project. In summary, the recommendations are as follows: the reallocation of £957,000 of capital budget to the Environmental Compliance Project, and the approval of a key decision to award a contract with a value of excess of £250,000. The depot at Manston Road is the operational base for the Council's cleansing service and vehicle fleet. Part of the depot is designated as a household, commercial and industrial waste transfer station and is the subject of a waste management permit that is administered by the Environment Agency. The permit sets out parameters for the handling of waste at the depot and requires that waste be stored by material type in areas with an impermeable surface and with sealed drainage. Waste is currently segregated and stored in the correct skip containers, but the standard of the surface on which the skips are stored and the condition of the drainage apparatus has deteriorated over time. The storage provision therefore needs to be improved to meet the strict requirements of the site permit. A £1,320,000 budget was approved as part of the 23-24 capital programme for a project to improve infrastructure at Manston Road Depot, including the waste storage infrastructure. This sum was based on early estimate of works cost in 2022. Since then, the scope has been broadened to incorporate other compliance works as described in section 3.6 of this report, and these include excuse me, new staff welfare facilities, works to existing drainage and road surfaces, health and safety related compliance works within the depot, and depot workshop and office building compliance works. The report provides more detail, including costs incurred to date and the forecast further costs of these other works. Table 1 in section 3 of the report also provides a breakdown of all costs and shows how the budget shortfall has been derived. The total cost of the depot environmental compliance projects has been estimated at £1,761,000. The report describes a budget gap of £957,000 that exists in relation to the described projects and proposes that funding be reallocated from the vehicle replacement programme. The project cannot be delivered without this funding reallocation. Without the delivery of this project, there is a high risk of enforcement action by the environmental agency. This would impact on statutory service provision by the council. Importantly, the proposed reallocation of funding will not impact on the delivery of the vehicle replacement programme, and the report provides some high-level information on the VRP budget this year. A scheme has now been designed to REBA Stage 3, and a tender process is anticipated to be completed by the end of October, with work starting at the end of the year. In addition to the funding reallocation, the report also seeks approval to commit funds to the works which will exceed £250,000 key decision threshold. Chair, I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. Is there a seconder? Councillor Yates. Members, any comments? Councillor Bright.
Yeah, I just wanted to pass comment on the investment in the new staff wellbeing facilities. I think it's really important in any job that people feel valued and they feel respected and they feel that they matter. So the fact that we're investing in better facilities for staff is really important, because I think, you know, we've seen from the numbers elsewhere in kind of the absence that we've seen that actually there's probably underlying reasons for that, and I think this is the kind of thing that just signals that they're vital to our success in delivery of services. So well done to the officers for that.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear, and maybe for members here who haven't actually been to the depot, and I'm hoping to invite members to come to the depot. I've already discussed that with Councillor Rogers. When you go there, the majority of the site, you'd walk in the site, and apart from the stuff that we've done on the roads and making it easier and safer, it's like going back to 1970. You know, it's been in that state, in a poor state, for quite a considerable number of years. And as Councillor Bright said, we owe it to the staff to do that. And I'm just very pleased that is now going to be in process, if we vote for it, Chair. Thank you.
Nobody else? Members, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We move. No, you can't go home, Councillor Alban. We might let some of the officers go home, but you can't go home. Okay, and we move on then to the next item, which is the Biodiversity Duty Report, first report. Purpose of this report is to meet the Council's statutory obligation under Environment Act 2021 to publish a Biodiversity Duty Report. The first duty report outlines the actions TDC has taken from January 2024 to March 2025 to conserve and enhance biodiversity across its services. It provides a stock take of progress, identifies areas for improvement and proposes actions for the 2025-2030 period. The report demonstrates how biodiversity is being integrated across departments, embedded in planning and development processes and promoted through community engagement, education and land management. This report will inform strategic priorities, future policy development and annual monitoring processes. Cabinet's asked to note the comments of the first Biodiversity Duty Report as required by the Environment Act 2021, cover the reporting period January 2024 to March 2025, approve the identified future actions for service areas set out in the report, to support continued compliance with the statutory biodiversity duty, endorse the continued development of a green infrastructure strategy and the integration of biodiversity considerations into planning policy, procurement, regeneration and service delivery, and agree to monitor progress annually and review the frequency and content of biodiversity reporting in June 2026 based on evolving legislation, data availability and local priorities. And I so move. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Alban. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Leader. I welcome this report and agree that much needs to be done to encourage biodiversity in Thanet. My concern is that the damage will be done to the ecology and habitat on Minster Marshes by sealing. There are many endangered bird species. This is a large area that needs protection to sustain and encourage wildlife, not destroy it. Will the Biodiversity Officer Working Group fully support Minster Marshes and work on mitigation measures should the sealing project go ahead? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Rogers. I mean, I think we're all concerned about the impact on biodiversity by the proposed development of Minster Marshes. As you probably know, the Council has met with the Save Minster Marshes group. We had a productive meeting and I think we have a shared view. And the Council explained what actions it was taken in terms of the ongoing DCO process. I'm not sure whether any of the officers can tell me whether they think that this falls under the remit of the Biodiversity Working Group. Councillor Verrill? Mr Verrill, you've been promoted.
Promotion. Thank you. Yeah, the biodiversity officer has been involved in working with the development management team, Ian Livingston's team, in providing responses through the process, the NSIP process, and I think that the proposers of the scheme will have to provide mitigation for the scheme. They will be required to do that under the various regulations that they face. So, yes, we are commenting, yes, we are involved in that examination process, and they will need to provide mitigation. I suppose the issue about whether that mitigation is considered to be adequate will be a decision for the examining authority, so the inspectors overseeing that decision.
Thank you, Mr Verrill. And Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. Following up on Councillor Rogers' question, Mr Verrill's reply, I'm interested in what monitoring happens afterwards on mitigation, because we've seen some developments in that area already where mitigation has been promised and doesn't appear to be being delivered. I've got a few other questions, if I may. Really pleased to see this, particularly pleased to see the progress by service area. It's really helpful for councillors to be able to see how it breaks down across the council. Great to see the engagement with voluntary groups. There's a lot of other voluntary groups that I'm sure would be interested in being involved in this. Also, so would town and parish councils. I can't see a mention of them, I may have missed it, but certainly with those of us who are double hatters and who are working in these sorts of fields would be really interested in working with the officers concerned. My questions are, I noticed there's been staff training. It would be great if we can get a further councillor briefing on this at some point soon. I'm wondering why this hasn't gone to scrutiny and why there are no plans to send it to scrutiny until sometime next year. I'd like to know a bit more about what's involved in the green infrastructure strategy, what exactly that covers. I'm quite happy to have that information after today's meeting if it's not appropriate today. Thank you.
I'm sure we can follow up and provide you with more information. The reason it hasn't been to scrutiny is because it's not a key decision. We send key decisions to scrutiny first. I understand what it says in the report about it going to scrutiny later. If scrutiny asks for it to come to a meeting in the near future, I'm sure it could come to scrutiny. I don't think there's any reason why it wouldn't, but the onus is on scrutiny to ask. In terms of the parish council involvement, I think that's something we'll take away and give some consideration to. I don't know, Mr Verrill, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just really briefly to say this is obviously just a stock take report for the first year, so there's lots that has been going on right across the council in different departments, but obviously we're looking over the next few years to gradually step that up to talk to other bodies involved in this and try so that hopefully collectively we're really achieving something.
Thank you. Just to say that a couple of things where it says such a thing is behind schedule, I'm noticing particularly there are things there that I think town and parish councils could be helpful to work with. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, it is a very wide-ranging and high-level report. As you say, it covers lots of service areas, but it doesn't necessarily drill down into the detail in each service area. So I can understand that members might have more questions, and we'll consider what the appropriate way to brief members is going forward. Members, any comments? Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'm just really happy to see this report coming forward. So I think when you look at 2025 onwards, it talks about creating green corridors, wildlife, habitat restoration. That's exactly what we want to be doing. And we're going to be monitoring this progress annually, as mentioned in the report. I know TDC does work with local organisations, so I would recommend getting in touch with Mr. Marmo, Head of Coastal and Public Realm, if you do have organisational town councils, because in Margate we've introduced Wilderness to Wonderland to the Open Spaces team, and now they've got a good licence agreement for outside Margate Station, and it looks beautiful. It's a great welcome, and it's working really well. So yeah, I think this report it's very high level, but it's setting the right tone and messaging. Yeah, so thanks to all the officers involved, because I think people on the ground are seeing the difference. I was at the outside Dane Valley Woods on a nature walk and talk this week, and everyone involved was like, oh my God, you can look back on Google to like that area outside Dane Valley Woods. There weren't any trees planted along the road. They didn't have the kind of the grass cutting regime they do now, where there's big wild meadows, and it just looks so much better and it's so much more enjoyable. And when the sun, on a really hot day, people are dog walking under the trees. So yeah, these things do make a difference, and it's great to see. Thanks.
Any other comments, members? No, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And the next item is item 7, revoking the First Homes policy statement. This report asks Cabinet to recommend to Council that it formally revoke the First Homes interim policy statement. The IPS was based on a written ministerial statement and changes to planning practice guidance, both dated May 2021. The IPS was adopted by the Council on the 14th of July 2022 in the light of a change in the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework. However, more recent changes to the NPPF mean that it no longer requires the delivery of first homes unless it's considered that they meet a local need. And it's probably worth saying, for anybody who's not familiar with it, there's no suggestion that people don't need first homes. The suggestion is a specific policy initiative which has that title, which was introduced by the previous government. That's what we're talking about. There's been little interest in the provision of first homes as specified, and it's not considered that the provision of first homes meets a local need. It's therefore recommended that the IPS is revoked. This would mean that the Council would revert to using policy SP23 in its original form in the adopted Local Plan 2020 to assess the affordable housing requirement for new development without reference to first homes. This approach will be more closely aligned to local housing needs, and homes that would otherwise be scheduled as first homes could instead be provided as other forms of low-cost home ownership, such as shared ownership. So I am moving that we recommend to Council that First Homes interim policy statement be revoked with immediate effect. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Alban, got in before you, Councillor White. I know you're desperate to talk about this. So it's unusual that I'm introducing a housing item, but it is because it's planning policy. It sits in my portfolio, but Councillor White is desperate to get her hands on it. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Leader. In point 3.6 of the report, it's stated that the Council is still committed to affordable home ownership solutions such as shared ownership, which, as you said in the report, which have been more successful and accessible. But then goes on to report that concern over potential buyers' inability to obtain mortgages has led to some sites seeking a deed of variation to amend its first homes to affordable rent homes, for which there is a guaranteed market. In order to ensure that potential home purchases are not disadvantaged, is it the intention that proportion of homes previously allocated for first homes provision will now be allocated for shared ownership rather than for affordable rent? Thank you.
Do you want to come in on that, Councillor White? I'm looking over your shoulder at Mr Porter, but I know you want to get in first.
Yes, I can come back on that. Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Bayford. So we have some of the numbers here around provision of affordable ownership. So currently we have 292 units of affordable ownership at Westwood Village. We have around 130 units for Humbers Mill. We have 59 units for Spitfire Green Phase 3. Shottendane Road, we have 39 units. Birchington, we don't know yet, but we know there will be. Land adjacent to Samson Grange, Nash Road, 14 units, and land south of Manston Road is 4 units. So we are deliberately making provision for affordable ownership, and under our current policy it should be a 70-30 split, so 70% rent, 30% affordable. We're still working to that and working to meet that. It's simply that the first homes policy doesn't work for mortgage providers and doesn't work for purchasers generally. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, members? Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. Councillor White, you can do the next one, which is acquisition of 11 Section 106 homes at Fairlawn, Northwood Road, Broadstairs.
Thank you, Leader. As part of our larger acquisitions programme, we have negotiated to acquire 11 homes from local SME developer Knights Lodge Properties on the Fairlawn site in Northwood Road in Broadstairs. Councillors may recall that originally Cabinet agreed in November 2023 that 7 homes on the site should be purchased. A further 4 homes have become available through a change to the Section 106 agreement, which means that the acquisition has been reassessed to include 11 properties. These are as follows: 4 one-bed flats, 4 two-bed houses, and 3 three-bed houses. An offer of 1.7 million for all properties has been made to the developer and accepted. This represents good value as the open market value of these homes total circa £2.4 million, representing an anticipated 30% discount for high quality homes in an area where we often struggle to secure affordable housing. This level of discount is particularly important as the additional 4 homes were originally designated as first homes. However, with the developers universally stating that they are unable to proceed with that tenure of home, we have stepped in to deliver these, obtaining them at the appropriate discount and simultaneously increasing the provision of homes for affordable rent, which is by far and away our highest need within Thanet. We often discuss our acquisitions policies and the checks that all prospective purchasers go through to determine whether acquisitions are suitable and affordable for the council. To demonstrate some of these procedures in action, it is worth noting that the council has also inspected other sites in the developer's ownership, which are all finished to a high quality specification, but is only proceeding with those that are suitable for our needs and which meet our financial requirements for acquisitions. Though some sites will not be proceedable for the council, with the strict rules that it abides by and holistic approach that we take to acquisitions, these 11 homes are suitable and will be excellent homes for our residents and an excellent asset for the council for many years to come. In line with our financial and affordability checks, the structure of the proposed deal has been analysed by finance colleagues and their input is included in the report for members to see that the acquisition is viable. The proposed purchase will create a cash flow surplus at the end of year 1. These homes will achieve an anticipated EPC B rating and will go straight into the council's housing revenue account, where they will be managed by the council's tenant and leaseholder service, whose excellent work we are discussing later in this meeting. The acquisition of these homes take our acquisitions alone up to 315, with well over 70 acquired in the general fund for temporary accommodation, meaning that with our own developments, we are already well past our target of at least 400 new council homes by 2028. We will be providing a fuller update on numbers at next month's meeting, which is incredibly exciting, if you're me, and I want to extend thanks to everyone involved in our acquisitions programme. Every home acquired is a new and essential home for our residents, and you are making a difference to our residents in everything you do. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor White. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Keane, thank you. And Councillor White, you're not the only person excited by the forthcoming report. We're all looking forward to it. And it's something we're very proud of as an administration. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. This is really excellent news and we're fully behind it, and well done to everybody. We're interested, and we know that this has only just recently gone through planning, and we're just interested about the timescales. When are we expecting the homes will be ready? When are we going to be paying for them? How does the finance schedule work? Those are the sorts of things we'd like to know a little bit more about, if that's possible, please.
Oh, sorry, I hadn't put the microphone on. Thank you, Councillor Austin. I'm happy to hand over to acquisitions for details.
I don't think we've got the exact timelines with us tonight, but what we can do is include them in the programme update report for you.
Thank you. Members, any comments on this one? More good news. Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. And we move on to item 9, which is the acquisition of additional homes using part of the Local Authority Housing Fund Round 3 funding. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. Members will be aware that the Council has previously been successful in securing 2 allocations from the Local Authority Housing Fund provided by central government over the past 2 years. We have now been successful in obtaining a further £632,100 from the Local Authority Housing Fund, known as LAHF, to fund the acquisition of 4 more homes. One of these properties will be used by the Council for temporary accommodation, and the other 3 will be used for resettlement purposes in line with the requirements of the fund, which in this round provides for temporary accommodation for homeless households and for households on the Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme who supported UK forces in Afghanistan. Again, through the Council's proactive acquisitions team, 4 further homes have been identified that meet the criteria required by the fund. The homes are 3 3-bedroomed houses by Whip Vistry at Westwood Point and 1 4-bedroomed home from BDW at Spitfire Green. The Council has an existing relationship with both developers and is confident of the quality of housing being produced, with anticipated EPC B rating, which is the minimum we aim for in acquisitions to increase and promote energy efficiency in Thanet housing stock. The total cost of the homes is £943,487 for the 3 3-bed homes and a further £360,000 for the 1 4-bed property. The LAHF funding is significant, subsidising circa 40% of the cost of each property, and the finance section of the report sets out the viability for the acquisitions of the Council. The Council also worked closely with the relevant team at Kent County Council in identifying the homes available for resettlement and the families who will potentially benefit from the homes. It's worth noting that originally round 3 of the funding was initially oversubscribed, and the Council was advised that there would be no opportunities to obtain further funding. The fact that there is now an opportunity indicates that many local authorities have had to return their monies to MHCLG through non-delivery. As a result, the Council was invited to submit an expression of interest to secure further funding on top of the amounts notified to OSP and Cabinet in July 2024. And we are proud to be able to deliver properties that not only provide a significant moral good, but also provide excellent long-term housing for Thanet and rental income to support the purchase of further council properties for those on our register. This again highlights that we are demonstrating that we are a proven and reliable deliverer of homes through many mechanisms, and that our abilities are recognised throughout levels of government. It shows that officers have the right connections to speak to those at central government, and it also shows that we are horizon scanning and seizing the opportunities that present themselves through an agile setup in the strategic housing team, who are delivering far beyond what were already very high expectations. These EPC B rated homes can be added to the Council's housing stock in due course and produce a cash flow surplus from year 2. In the meantime, the social, moral and economic good that they are achieving is something that we should be very proud of as an area, especially as we are delivering where others have been unable or unwilling to. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor White. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Keane. From my point of view, I think it's worth stressing that this is additionality. These are not properties that we'd otherwise be able to purchase through our existing resources, and also the contribution they make to the housing revenue account, which means that there's additional income flowing in to support our residents who need social housing. So it seems to be a win-win from my point of view. Members, any other comments? Councillor Bright?
Yeah, I'd just like to share Councillor Whitehead's congratulation of officers for the recognition that they're clearly getting from government. I think that it demonstrates, and I think the LGA awards earlier on in the year demonstrated that we're kind of punching above our weight as a council of this size in this field. And I'd also, like to echo the points on the moral case for this as well. Is obviously these people that will be moving into these homes have helped our services overbroad and deserve to be looked after. And I'm personally proud that this administration is doing all we can to do that.
Thank you, members. Nothing else further? Okay, that's been moved to second. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And we move on to the housing options update, which is Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. This report provides a comprehensive overview of the current operational landscape within the housing options team, detailing its roles, legal responsibilities, and the significant pressures that it currently faces. It further highlights key statistical data regarding households in temporary accommodation and those seeking assistance, alongside setting out the requirement for additional resources to address the escalating demand. The Housing Options team has been under unprecedented pressure throughout 2024, a trend that continues to intensify. Homelessness approaches have increased by over 50% across this period, principally due to increasing rents, the effects of gentrification, and pressures relating to short-term rentals. This immense strain is particularly evident in the escalating costs associated with temporary accommodation, which we are actively working to mitigate through continuing investment in our in-house temporary accommodation programme, with, I think it's now 80 properties as of today acquired already. Temporary accommodation costs are of considerable concern to all local authorities with housing responsibilities, as the costs of temporary accommodation come from the general fund, not the housing revenue account, meaning that costs of the general fund have the ability to directly impact service delivery across the council. Our in-house temporary accommodation scheme addresses this, ensuring that not only are we not losing income to temporary accommodation, but are in fact bringing in income for the council by the end of the first year. Last year alone, the net cost of temporary accommodation resulted in a substantial overspend of £1.8 million. This is a clear indicator of the financial challenges posed by the current housing crisis, and exactly why we need to invest in our own temporary accommodation and why we need to work to support families facing homelessness. The demand for housing assistance continues to increase, which has previously led to considerable delays in the assessment process. We have 1,217 households on the housing register. Of these, a significant proportion, 860 households, are awaiting assessment. We have already reduced this waiting time from 33 weeks to 15 weeks, but we have a long way to go and need to ensure that we are responding to the level of need. On average, the team is receiving 59 new applications for housing assistance each week. Processing these cases is of paramount importance, as is ensuring that those already on our register are supported. Our housing options team continues to see pressure on its service, with the last year, January to December 24, receiving 1,184 approaches from individuals and families at risk of homelessness. This equates to approximately 98 approaches per month from households facing the imminent threat of losing their homes. When I was first elected, I continually raised the issue of ever-escalating need. Unfortunately, my predictions have proved correct, and to address this need, we now require further resourcing. Despite increasing demand, the team has demonstrated significant success in preventing homelessness. In the year spanning April 24 to March 25, prevention duty was accepted for 412 households. Crucially, 302 of these cases, representing a 73% success rate, resulted in positive prevention outcomes, where homelessness was successfully averted. The current regional average is 52.7%, with a national average of 52%, which demonstrates the team's dedication and effectiveness in supporting those most at risk. It also demonstrates the progress our teams are making against national recommendations. In line with current recommendations, we already have a well-established preventative service performing exceptionally well, and we plan to expand our approaches further in this area in working alongside external agencies to support families. We have also reintroduced face-to-face direct housing surgeries, both officer and cabinet-led, to support individuals with applications and queries. The number of email inquiries have reduced significantly since these became established. We currently have 245 households in temporary accommodation, with 75 out-of-area placements. In September 2024, we had 319 households in temporary accommodation, which gives a current reduction of 74 households in TA. We have acquired 80 properties for our in-house temporary accommodation, which produces surplus in year one. Currently 30 are already in our management, meaning that households are accommodated in our own temporary accommodation in Thanet, which reduces both stress on families and costs. Given the sustained and escalating pressures outlined above, including the pressure of previous temporary accommodation costs, the growing housing register and the increasing number of homelessness approaches, this report formally includes a request for additional resources, increasing our homelessness advisors and temporary accommodation support to better manage placements and ensure the quality of the remaining external placements. These resources are vital to enhance the team's capacity, reduce assessment waiting times, improve prevention outcomes, and ultimately better serve the needs of the community in addressing the ongoing housing crisis. Cabinet are asked the following: to note the contents of the report and the detail regarding the pressures within the Housing Options team, and to approve the movement of £150,000 from the TA budget to support the additional resources. I move the recommendations within this report.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Do you have a second? Councillor Keane, thank you. I have to say that it's a very useful report, not just in terms of what it proposes, which I think makes a lot of sense, but there's a lot of statistics in there which I think members of the council and the public will find to be of interest. And in some respects they're chastening, but at least we've shown movement in the right direction, and I think we can be pleased with that. The proposals make sense in terms of there's a strong business case for them, but of course we can still be buffeted by the external factor of demand, which we can't totally control. But it seems a very sensible proposal to me. Any other comments, members? Councillor Keane?
Just to say that I really welcome this because we've done so much work already, particularly around the bringing the temporary accommodation back in-house, that I think it's great that we can continue investing in this.
Councillor Bright?
Yeah, obviously echo what my colleagues have said. We always talk about, and it's great that we talk about the savings income, to lessen the impact on the general fund that this brings. But the numbers are vague, and I haven't got any with me. But research has shown that families and children brought up in insecure households suffer from poorer mental and physical health. They suffer from poorer educational outcomes, and they suffer from, and in the end, they tend to have poorer long-term economic outcomes. So what we're saving here to the council taxpayer is a drop in the ocean compared to what we're actually saving in the long term in the increased health and educational benefits and the increased sort of job prospects of the kids that are going to be brought up in these homes. So I think it's the best thing to do, and I'm so glad that we're doing it.
Councillor Whitehead.
Yeah, if I could come back on that. I know I say this a lot, but housing is a health issue. It needs to be looked at in a holistic way because providing secure and affordable housing is one of the most easy or one of the most accurate predictors of future health of families and of children. it's something that we're addressing through the acquisitions that we're making, but it's something that we need to address in terms of the immediate need for temporary accommodation, because not only are families being disrupted in terms of not having access to affordable accommodation, the disruption that comes with out-of-area placements, potentially losing school placements, potentially losing family support, potentially losing jobs in the case of parents, all of this has a profound impact on our residents. So obviously within reports, it's a huge positive that our in-house temporary accommodation makes surplus from the end of year one. That's brilliant because it means money goes back into the general fund effectively. However, the most important thing that we're doing is actively providing for our residents who are most vulnerable and children who are going to be at risk of significant disadvantage if placed out of area for extended periods. So I know I have a tendency to say this anyway, but it's worth noting that the officers who work in housing options are under a huge amount of pressure, an absolutely huge amount of pressure, because you are usually working with families and individuals who are at some of the worst points in their life, and you're doing the best you can to support them within systems that are often quite limited. So I think it's very important at this point to recognise that and the efforts that have been made so far, and to acknowledge how important this support is to them to be able to deliver the service that they want to. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we all recognise that whilst all the matters that we bring forward are important, housing is the thing that has the most potential to affect people's quality of life, people's life chances going forward, and I'm very proud of all the work that we've done on housing, and I think this proposal will help enhance that further. Members, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. And not unrelated, moving on to selective licensing, request for additional resources. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. Tonight we are being asked to consider a request for funding to further explore our proposed selective licensing approach. Local housing authorities are empowered under the Housing Act 2004 to introduce selective licensing in all or parts of their area to tackle problems in the private rented sector. We have previously taken this approach in Cliftonville West and Margate Central, which improved the quality of the properties in the private rented sector across the wards. We have several wards which currently meet the central requirements for selective licensing, and we are exploring these options further to improve property standards for those within the private rented sector. All privately rented homes in an area subject to a selective licensing designation must be licensed with the local housing authority. A wide range of licence conditions relating to safety and management standards are attached to all selective licences. Such conditions are intended to improve living conditions, thereby leading to improved health and well-being outcomes for residents. We have seen significant improvements where we have introduced selective licensing previously, and we hope for the same in exploring an extended programme. Our initial selective licensing study suggests that 2 wider selective licensing designations should be considered across Margate and Ramsgate. These could potentially cover 12,000 privately rented homes across 8 wards. Understandably, the exploration and potential implementation of 2 simultaneous 5-year designations would be a significant undertaking, as the Council would need to follow strict and complex legal processes to ensure that designations are based on secure grounds. A budget of £190,000 is required to support the detailed preparation of scheme proposals, a public consultation, and the potential implementation of the proposed designations. This funding would allow the Council to engage specialist consultants, secure barrister oversight, and cover associated expenses. It is recommended that Cabinet recommends a £190,000 budget to Council to progress proposals for selective licensing, as set out in the Cabinet report, to be funded from the Investor Save Reserve, approves the appointment of specialist consultants to prepare consultation proposals for 1 or more new selective licensing designations in the district, agrees to consider a further report prior to the public consultation to approve the draft proposals and the public consultation exercise, notes that if Cabinet approves the consultation proposals, a third report will be presented to Cabinet, following the public consultation exercise, setting out the outcome of the consultation and making recommendations about whether the Council proceeds with one or more new selective licensing designations. And finally, notes the financial risk of using funds that may not be recovered if the selective licensing designations do not proceed. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor White. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Keane. Thank you. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Whitehead, for the report. If an extended selective licensing scheme is introduced, presumably landlords will pass any additional costs they incur onto tenants in the form of increased rents. Do we have any idea what the average increased amount per tenancy is likely to be, and do we know what proportion of tenants would have this sum met from housing benefit? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. So at this point, we're simply looking to allocate budgets so that we can move forward to deciding what selective licensing could look like. So as we don't actually know the scope of what's proposed at this point and we haven't decided on a final designation, we wouldn't be able to work out specific costs related to that. We can't control private landlords. That's kind of the issue in terms of why we require selective licensing, because we do have tenants in the private rented sector living in appalling conditions, and we need to make sure that those residents are safe. We can do that to a high degree of surety within our own properties. It is much harder to act on that outside our own properties. Selective licensing has worked previously in Cliftonville West and in Margate Central, so we will be looking very closely at what we can do to ensure that we have the same effect in other wards if we do apply it to those, and also to look at how we manage the financial implications that come forward from it. So we're already proposing landlord discounts related to numbers of properties. We're also proposing specific discounts in relation to supporting residents who are on our housing register. So all of these are things that we will look into when we are further down the line. But at the moment, we're just looking into the scoping exercise so that we can decide what's the right way forward effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, and I've listened with interest to your response to my colleague, this seems to fly in the face of the good work we've discussed earlier in this meeting, because adding a financial burden to any company means that company will pass it to the end user, in this case the tenant. £800, can I just confirm, by the way, this £800 application fee, is that for the 5-year period or is it an annual fee? So that covers the full 5-year period. Okay, that's allayed some of the concerns that I wanted to raise here, because had it been on an annualised basis, then it would have been a completely unacceptable percentage of the yield. What, however, I do think we need to look at is this broad brush approach the best way, or would we not be better creating jobs and opportunity and adding to the staff within the private rental department? Because that would enable direct enforcement, and bearing in mind there's much reinforced rights or obligations coming in under the private renters bill. So consequently, instead of, because this authority probably won't even exist by the time we got this through, by the time it's been challenged, debated, challenged again, you know how these processes work. So in order to deliver, and I laud and applaud the objectives to improve the housing conditions, because some years ago now, but I've suffered at the hands of a Rachmanite landlord, and it is not pleasant. And you're quite correct. The mental health impact it has on people in terms of feeling secure is immense. So please don't think I'm criticising the initiative to improve quality. I'm not convinced, though, this is the right way of doing it. And I'm a bit concerned that you want to spend another 190,000 on top of the 50 that's already spent. In the report in front of us, we're being compared to London boroughs in terms of levels of licence fee. We're not. We're a rural semi-rural council. We're not a London borough. So I think it's a bit disingenuous to try and compare us to what their costs are, because the population density and everything is completely different. But, you know, I would please appeal to you to consider perhaps other alternatives before committing to another, or the best part of £250,000, just to see if this is a good idea. It has benefits, but I can't see the value for money in it, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. We're already very certain of the benefits, or we wouldn't have come to this point. We know that it's worked in Cliftonville West and Margate Central. We know the capacity that it has to make an impact on residents that otherwise, frankly, we struggle to support. The staffing levels that we have within the private rented sector mean that it's very, very difficult to support everyone that we need to, because there are some very, very poor housing conditions out there. We're looking at this precisely because we know it's worked before. We're looking at it as a way that will actively improve our ability to care for people. You're right that the Renters Reform Bill is coming through, but again, it's still on us and the private rented sector to actually deliver on that. So although it's good that we have the central powers to act, it's still the council that has to enforce it. It's still the council that has to go and make the checks. It's still the council that has to follow up on what can be exceptionally complicated landlord relationships and sometimes shell companies and many, many extremely complicated forms of lease and rent. So what we're trying to do here is establish a task force who can effectively deal with the scale of the issue that we have in the private rented sector. I love in-house provision, as you may have noticed in pretty much everything I do. But even I acknowledge that the scale of the issue in the private rented sector currently is beyond what we can deliver internally. So that's why we're seeking to scope this further, because there are a huge number of residents who are living in very poor accommodation and who are frankly quite frightened to do anything about it. We have the ability to try and solve that, so that's why we're moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. I'm a bit puzzled by the description of the district as semi-rural. I mean, obviously there is a large rural part of the district, but as far as I can see, none of that is proposed to be included in the selective licensing scheme. The wards that seem to be mentioned at the moment are urban wards, which have a relatively high population density. So I'm not sure of the relevance of that comment. The other point I would make is that it's been suggested that we spend the money on additional private housing sector officers for enforcement action. That would be lovely, but the money wouldn't come back as far as I can see. The basis of this proposal, which is to be funded from the Investor Save Reserve, is that the selective licensing scheme, if proceeded with, will actually bring that money back in through the scheme. Now, I think the idea of employing more people in the private housing sector per se is a lovely idea, but you could have some idea how you're going to fund that, at least if you're in the administration as opposed to the opposition. Members, any comments? Councillor Keane.
Thank you. I'm a councillor in Cliftonville West and was when we had the previous selective licensing in place, and I just want to say what a huge difference it made. It's an area with a lot of private rentals, including lots of HMOs and small flats, and it was a really valuable tool to tackle some of the poor conditions that our residents were living in. And so I really welcome that we're consulting to get this back, and I think it's absolutely right that we commit this budget to make sure we get a proper consultation and that we do everything correctly. So I fully support this.
Councillor Alban.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, as there are obviously a lot of very good landlords in Thanet, but on the other side of that coin, there are also a lot of not very good landlords in Thanet. And I think, as Councillor Whitehead previously stated, you know, certainly in Ramsgate and the issues that I've come across as a ward councillor in Eastcliff, of which is one of the areas that this will cover, trying to get hold of landlords is very difficult because there are either belong to a company or they belong to even as fact as pension funds, you know, and they have arm's length people dealing with the day-to-day runnings of those buildings, flats, etc., and it's not good. Also, in my previous life as an officer, I've worked very closely back with the housing team when we're looking at HMOs and everything of that nature, and I have to say that there's times that I felt really sorry for the people who are actually living in the squalor that they were living in, with no way of getting out, because the landlord wasn't doing anything, and other residents who've been threatened. You know, if they go to the council, then other things will happen to them. So, as far as I'm concerned, Leader, this is a great step forward, and I think we should expand it in these areas. So I fully support it, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor White.
Yeah, I'd just like to come back on one of Steve's points in that I think some of the assumptions are doing a disservice to a lot of our landlords, in that we have very close relationships with quite a lot of landlords. We have a yearly meeting with landlords who specifically want to support families on our housing register and tenants. And so the assumption that they're automatically going to effectively pass this cost on to tenants, that's an experience that I don't recognise from conversations with many of our landlords. There are some very, very bad landlords. There are equally some people who very much want to do a public service effectively. And I don't think it's right to assume that this would be used in a negative way. We do recognise the stresses, especially on small landlords, but that's exactly why we're looking at discounts within the licensing scheme, so that we can support landlords not only with how they manage their properties, but also with the costs of doing so. So again, these are all things to come forward in the future, but I think it's important to recognise that we do have some very supportive landlords here whose initial thought will not be, I can hike the rent now. Thank you.
Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Leader. Because these questions have been asked, I just wanted to flag one particular item on the report, which is Clause 11, crime and disorder implications. I'll just read out part of it because I think it's really interesting. The Housing Stock Condition Survey shows that over a 5-year period, the wards with the highest number of incidents of antisocial behaviour in the private rented sector include Cliftonville West, Central Harbour, Margate Central and Eastcliff. And then it goes on to later say the inspections would give the council an opportunity to identify and report criminal activity. One of the first things I kind of organised in Margate Central was a community meeting after someone had been cookered, and then a County Lines gang member came outside and attacked someone on the street with a machete, and that was probably 2018. And no, 2019, 2020. I think we do need to take into account that this also means more council staff will be going into residents' properties and seeing these things, and are able to report them. And I think that's also another benefit as well, which is really useful for us to see and try and address. So, yeah, fully support this. Thanks.
Yeah, just to support Councillor Yates's point, it's something that we found, especially when we've introduced extra support within our tower blocks. Residents generally feel a lot safer, a lot more secure, and issues around antisocial behaviour or tenants being worried about negative behaviours it's dropped significantly since we've introduced those measures. So again, that kind of oversight has positives across many different fronts. Thank you.
Okay, members. I mean, I think, I hope we're going to be able to take this forward, but I think we ought to just underline the fact that there are 2 more reports to come to Cabinet before we can consider introducing a selective licensing scheme. So people shouldn't run away with the idea that just because we're agreeing these funds to support the process, that the decision has already been made. Clearly, we have to run a consultation process. We have to take advice from the consultants about the most appropriate way of setting this up. And we will be considering the issues on both occasions when it comes back. So this is not a decision tonight to bring in a selective licensing scheme, and it would be unfortunate if anybody portrayed it as such. Members, the recommendations have been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. And we move on to item 12, which isn't yours, Councillor Wade. The 2025-26 Budget Monitoring Report, number 1, Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Leader. This report provides the first budget monitoring update for the 25-26 financial year, covering general fund revenue and capital forecasts, as well as the housing revenue count as of 30th of June 2025. It details the financial position, highlights areas of overspend and underspend, and proposes various budget adjustments for approval by Cabinet and Council. When considering this monitoring report, it's worth recognising that this is the first monitoring report and is planned to manage this projected overspend. We are strengthening budget monitoring, addressing persistent high sickness absence rates and cleansing, enhancing oversight of staff vacancies, exploring long-term solutions for areas like our port and harbour operations. In addition to the regular budget monitoring reports presented to Cabinet throughout this year, separate reports will be provided to Cabinet on the effectiveness of these management actions and the progress in managing budget pressures in key areas. So the key points: general fund revenue. A forecast overspend of £1.814 million is anticipated, primarily due to pressures in homelessness services, housing benefit agency spend and income shortfalls. In the General Fund Capital Programme, an underspend of £24.561 million is projected against the £77.043 million budget, with relatively low committed spend to date, indicating potential slippage. A large proportion of this underspend is in relation to the Pathfinder projects, and clause 9.5 of this report seeks to reprofile £17 million of this budget to 26-27. Other schemes that are requiring reprofiling, such as temporary accommodation, will be reflected within the next monitoring report. Housing revenue account. The forecast surplus of £26,000 is expected against the HRA budget. Similar to the General Fund Capital Programme, the HRA is projecting slippage. Again, this budget will be updated to Q2 to avoid repeating this statement. Income streams. Business rates collection is on track, while council tax collection is slightly behind profile, reflecting wider economic challenges. On reserves, general fund reserves are significantly lower than in recent years, emphasising the need for tight budget control to maintain sustainable levels. On budget adjustments, this report recommends supplementary capital budgets and other capital programme adjustments for both the general fund and HRA, requiring approval from Cabinet and Council where appropriate. I move the recommendations contained within the report.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. We have a seconder, Councillor Alban. Thank you. We have no speakers under 20.1 on the budget monitoring. Members, any further comments? I know we've discussed these issues at some length recently. Okay, members, it's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. We move back to Councillor Whitehead. The Tenant Leaseholder Services KPIs Q1 Housing Performance Report.
Thank you, Leader. Tonight, Cabinet is being asked to note the key performance indicators for Q1. The operational performance for the Tenant and Leaseholder Service remains steady and strong. Q1 this year saw the start of the new partnering repairs contract. As the contract was won by Mears, there was no outward change to how residents access the service, and the key performance indicators continue to show strong performance. In the background, changes have been made to improve customer satisfaction and drive efficiencies. The team are still finding the void's target time of 33 days a challenge due to the condition that many void properties are returned to us. Many require extensive works before they are suitable for new tenants. This obviously impacts on the time that the properties remain untenanted. However, nationally, the average void turnaround time is 76 days, meaning that our current performance is well above the national average. We will spend some time in Q2 realigning the target to something that is more reflective of the current environment and current pressures in terms of property conditions. Arrears performance has improved again, but not at the rate seen last financial year, and ends the quarter at 2.56%. This is not surprising considering the significant improvement from the 7% arrears under East Kent Housing, so we are expecting improvements in smaller increments. The capital programme is progressing as expected, with 3 large projects beginning that have previously been delayed. This includes Churchfields and Royal Crescent. Cyclical programmes have started and are progressing well. Parts of the tower block project are still delayed by the BSR, Building Safety Regulator, but activity can now be seen at Trove and Kennedy, where scaffolding is going up around the buildings so that the external wall insulation can be stripped. And we had, I think, a very positive consultation at Harbour Towers discussing the next steps for their blocks. Compliance performance is strong, with gas safety remaining at 100% compliance in Q1 and electrical safety increasing to 98.58%. It's also worth noting that apart from amber delivery on the tower block project, due to the reasons previously discussed, we are green across all RAG reports. The FRA actions continue to be closely monitored, closing out 138 actions in Q1. Some changes have been made to the compliance team through the recent tenant and leasehold service restructure to introduce 2 new posts to the team. These new posts are in response to new legislation regarding structural and fire safety that have put extra burdens on the team. Finally, there are 4 new, rather beautiful dashboards that provide information on the compliance of the revised consumer standards. The team are providing more detailed information in Q1 on the types of projects and actions that are being carried out to reach full compliance. From Q2, this will reduce to 1 dashboard to provide a high-level compliance overview. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Did you have a seconder? Councillor Yates, thank you. Members. Councillor Bright.
Just very quickly, obviously it's all really good news. I think we talked before about the antisocial behaviour categorisation, so that would be good to see what we decide on next time. Thanks.
Okay, members, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Councillor Whitehead, item 14, the Tenant and Leaseholder Services Annual Reports.
You love it, Steve. Thank you, Leader. Tonight, Cabinet is asked to note and approve the Tenant and Leaseholder Services Annual Report 24-25 and note the Complaints Performance and Service Improvement Report 24-25. Every year, the Regulator for Social Housing requires all social housing providers to produce a report for its tenants. This year's report provides information on how the Council's tenant and leaseholder services spend money on different service areas, for example, responsive repairs and planned maintenance. It also provides performance information and how we are working with residents to improve services or to maintain landlord compliance. Tenants are genuinely at the heart of everything that we do here, and this is why Sally, Tracy and I wrote the foreword to the annual report together. It's only through officers, councillors, tenants and leaseholders working as one that we have been able to produce this year's results, and I am incredibly pleased to be introducing our annual report for 24-25 as it shows our ongoing and passionate commitment to providing excellent housing services and maintaining safe, well-managed homes. It is the voices of tenants that are the most important to our progress. What they need, want and deserve from our service is central to how we work and all the services that we provide. Our tenant satisfaction measures show how well we have done across this year, and all involved should be rightly proud of what has been achieved. It is expected that social housing providers should work towards an uplift of at least 1% per year in each target area. Our average increase across all target areas is 3.4% overall, including a 4.9% improvement in satisfaction relating to repairs and a hugely significant 8.1% increase in our tenants being satisfied that we listen to their views and act upon them. This, to me, is the foundation of our service, and to see such an increase in this area is testament to the amount of work that has been done to improve communication and involvement across our service. The work the team does with engaged residents is very important, and this report highlights how the input from residents directly improves the service. It is also very pleasing to see how our residents have contributed to the report, as demonstrated in the foreword and comments throughout. Following the introduction of the Social Housing Regulation Act 2023, it is a requirement for us to produce an annual complaints performance and service improvement report, and for this also to be published alongside. This report gives information on the complaints received throughout the year, the themes and trends identified through complaints, our lessons learned, and the improvements that are made directly from the lessons learned. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Keane. Members, any comments? Is that agreed? Thank you. And we move on to item 15. For tonight's purposes, I am Councillor Duckworth. This report concerns the clarification of principles for granting leases for less than best consideration. The document represents an important update to the acquisition and disposal policy which was adopted last year. This update clarifies the principles that will enable us to move forward with new lease arrangements that are designed to provide significant social, economic or environmental value to our district. Furthermore, this report establishes a clear, consistent and transparent framework for evaluating any future applications we may receive, so our residents and applicants are better informed. The core principles that we are clarifying for community groups or organisations seeking leases at less than market value are as follows. 1, that the applicant or group are properly incorporated. 2, we will review their financial accounts to confirm that they genuinely require a reduced rent. 3, that the applicants have an understanding of how to manage and maintain a property. And lastly, that they update the council annually, telling us how they're meeting their community objectives. These principles have been designed to be straightforward and non-onerous, aiming to provide a clear and accessible path for community groups, while simultaneously ensuring that the council meets its legal obligations under Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972 to secure best value. What I will say about this is that I already know from my experience, and Ms Plant knows what I'm going to say, that at least one community group which has been presented with these principles has been quite daunted by it. And I think it's important that the council, I think these are right, but I think it's important that the council works with groups to make sure that they can provide the information in a non-onerous way, as is suggested in my previous statement, and that we don't place burdens on them which is going to make their life more difficult. But I think that they are proper procedures. So I move the recommendation, which is Cabinet is asked to improve the implementation of the clarification index attached to the acquisition and disposal policy, setting out the principles for granting leases at less than best consideration. So I so move. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Yates, thank you. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Davis.
Jan, this is quite an... I'd welcome this initiative, obviously, but there's a couple of questions I had in terms of, firstly, the fact this has come here tonight, that nothing's changed in what was agreed, I understand. So I was just checking the rationale for this being brought forward if the report's as it stands late last year. But what I did wonder is how do you have a matrix that scores the social value, for example, or environmental value, and then gives you a percentile reduction against the cash value of a lease or site, or how does that work, that offsetting?
Ms Plant to speak to that, I think.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Davis, for the question. The first part of your question, this is a clarification point to the acquisitions and disposal policy. The policy remains the same. The body of the policy isn't changed. This is just a clarification note to be more transparent with the kind of principles that we are working on in the background. To the second point of your question around how we establish the level of discount on a lease, that is made based on the affordability that we can see within the accounts provided by the organisation. We then calculate the potential affordability they can, and then we calculate the offer of reduced rent or premium from anything between 0% discount to 100% discount, but that depends on their account and the market value of that property. So it's a case-by-case calculation.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to pick up on your comments there about the potentially daunting nature of some of our documentation. Obviously, members and officers will have at the forefront of their minds the recommendations of the scrutiny report that we made around work with the voluntary sector, which specifically highlighted the concerns that arise when we use our type of documentation and expect voluntary groups to manage with that. We've discussed that recently when we've been looking at the volunteer policy. It's come up in a number of other contexts, and I think we really do need to be mindful of making sure that what we are asking voluntary groups to deal with is manageable for them, and that we don't overwhelm them with jargon. Even this week I had a response from an officer on a casework matter which was completely impenetrable to me, let alone to the resident that it was addressed to. And we all do it with our own professional jargon, but I do think we need to be careful about that. My question really was about this. It's really good to see us building social value into our plans, and I'm just wondering whether there is potential for us to move this forward in other directions around, for example, procurement, asset transfers, disposals, things like that, so that our focus is not always on the financial return, when actually there are further benefits to be gained in the community from taking rather more of a social value approach.
I think there's always a balance to be struck, Councillor Austin, and you'll be familiar with the challenges of that, particularly in terms of the affordability of the services the council has to deliver. I think we're always open to look at opportunities to increase social value. I mean, in terms of your earlier points, I think, I know, as I've already referred to, that these principles have been perceived to be daunting when presented to at least one community group. Actually, if you look at them, I mean, they're not unreasonable, are they? The people that we're entering into an arrangement with actually exist as an organisation. It seems to be perfectly reasonable that they're not sitting on large piles of money which they're concealing from us and could spend, that they understand how to manage and maintain the property that they're operating. And I think the interesting one is that they update the council annually, telling us how they're meeting their community objectives, and how we define that and what we ask of them obviously is central to that. But they seem to be reasonable objectives, and we have to say we do have to meet our obligations under section 123 of the Local Government Act too. So we have to be able to show that we're doing the right thing, and this information will be obviously key to doing that. So yes, I hear what you say, but I think that this is simply a clarification to add on to the existing policy, and I think it's a useful and helpful one. And no doubt, if community groups do find it onerous, they will tell us, and we can assist them. Members, any comments? Councillor Bright.
I'd just like to say, I think this is probably partly a ward councillor's role as well. If a community group is struggling, and many don't, I've dealt with a few community groups in the years since I've been a councillor, and most of them are well set up. Most of them have got people within their organisation from a corporate background and are absolutely fine with these things. And where they're not, it really is quite often just a case of a ward councillor or someone from the property team just spending 5 minutes going through with them, and then the penny drops. So I think it's probably something that can be easily dealt with by us, who are obviously, we're the conduit, aren't we?
Members, any other comments? Okay, that one's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? That concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. Live stream will now end.